Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Hype Mini Reviews where hype comes to die. I'm School Writer and today we're going to talk about Stellar Blade. First and foremost, I have to warn you all that this game has Denuvo, and as usual, it's just as troublesome as Denuvo is. With that out of the way, Stellar Blade. This is actually a weird game to tackle because there is an immense amount of hype from both sides. I heard some critics say that this game is basically an awful over-sexualized shallow ripoff of Nier Automata, others that it was a superb game that just needed a chance. So I've decided to try out for myself this game and see what the fuzz was all about, clear of any positive or negative hype. So, how did it fare? So, what is it about? Blade is a 2024 third-person action game developed by the Korean studio Shift Up, previously known for the cell phone game Goddess of Victory Nier. This game was developed and directed by the studio CEO Kim Hyun-tae, who not only doesn't hide but gladly talks about how this game is seriously influenced by Nier Automata. In the far future, after an apocalyptic war, mankind was forced by the monstrous Natibas to abandon the planet and live in a colony. But mankind being mankind, they don't just give up, and constantly send incursions to destroy the devil's beasts and reclaim their home. The protagonist, Eve, is part of the 70th Airborne Infantry sent to the planet to eliminate the enemies of Mother Sphere, the ruler of the colonies. Things don't go too well, and soon she's forced to retreat and join forces with the scavenger Adam and the lost technician of the 5th Division, Lily. Alongside her newfound friends, Eve settles at the city of Shion, and from there, her hunt for the strongest Natibas in order to find their elder begins. But not everything is as it seems. Visuals. Being a third-person action game, Stellar Blade development took a heavy inspiration from Nier Automata. Fine. I'll just get this out of the way first. It's blatantly obvious where a lot of the focus and tech went to. As much as I won't dabble into the whole sexuality deal too much, it's impossible to avert my eyes from the focus of this game. Literally. Yes, Eve's body model is absurdly developed with lots of jiggle physics on her ass, breasts and hair. But here's the thing. I'm not exactly a connoisseur of spicy games, and even I can say that in matters of sexuality, this game is so vanilla it can still be green in the pods. Yes, vanilla flavor comes from a plant. But back to it. At worst, there are the scantily clad outfits that Eve wears and the female combatants also wear, and the jiggly physics. But the game literally just limits itself to that, plus one or two panty shots and the gymnastic movements here and there. There is no slow motion goo falling onto her breasts, nor perverted tentacles grabbing Eve and squeezing her while she squeals in an obviously erotic way. There is literally only one person, a woman, who lusts over Eve, and even then it's just fleeting comments that are immediately and brutally shot down. There are no perverts seeking to make use of her jiggle physics in-game, and everyone talks to her normally, which can potentially result in a hilarious scene where someone lays bleeding on the floor talking about the end of mankind as we know it, and there's a woman with a bikini wearing military glasses and a Christmas hat. In the end, all the hypersexualization I heard about boils down to pure and simple eye candy. Developed eye candy, focused eye candy, but still eye candy. This will be up to each person's flavors, but to me, eye candy is just frosting. I prefer when there is a whole cake beneath the frosting. And yeah, a lot of work for eye candy to the point I'm genuinely impressed. One of the main aspects of the game is to collect all sorts of clothes for Eve and her colleagues. And the amount of details in said outfits is astonishing, like translucent plastic interceding with cloths, different kinds of fabric, glowing neon tidbits, the metal in the glasses, and depending on the power of your rig, you may end up seeing the difference between plastic shades and glass shades. You can edit her glasses, her earrings, her clothes and style of color of her hair, and you bet that everything will be in full display all the time, including cutscenes. And no, it's not only Eve who has a stripperific outfit. just female combatants. Eye candy, pure and absolutely focused eye candy. That out of the way, character designs are actually quite interesting. There's a lot of show don't tell on how NPCs are made, and honestly, if I start describing them too much, I actually risk getting to spoiler territory, so I'll just say that they are good on their own. There was also a lot of love made on the horrifying abominations that Eve fights through the game, obviously inspired by mutated animals hybridized with human skin and organs. Their designs are quite functional as well. If you see a creature with an engorged claw, you bet your ass that you use it as a weapon or a shield. And other creatures will have crevasses to hide their spring-style weaponry or just long sharp claws. Teeth, claws, tails and more are used by the disgusting creatures, and the models are detailed enough that they will die in different ways depending on how you finish them off. Sadly, the devs focused on a small amount of really good cards over a way too big game, but at least they chose wisely to try some immersion. This means that while each area has different styles of enemies to show how the monster's life is adapting to different environments, they won't be that plentiful. 4 or 5 different enemies per area, more or less. Most of the times you see a specific kind of monster in the open, while another only hides in shade and so on. And yes, you see the same bosses showing up again from time to time. Speaking of, boss designs are good, but also blatantly obvious that they were taken from games such as Bayonetta, Devil May Cry or Dark Souls. If there is one thing you see through this entire game is that Kim Hyun-jae proudly wears his inspiration on his sleeves. Mechanical design is good too, with differences in cultures being shown through tech. Sadly, the hyper-focus on the graphics and the designs of the protagonists and NPCs means that something else had to take a hit. Thus, environments are somewhat lackluster, being so overly monochromatic that it gets hard to see things like enemies and collectibles sometimes. The map design itself is good, offering several hints through the environments such as... What's up, Mr. Sunday? What's up? Back to the review after Mr. Sunday's interesting opinion. The map design itself is good, offering several hints through the environments such as yellow painted ledges or signs that have double meanings, indicating something useful, like for example camp. It's the appearance of the maps themselves that are somewhat blender in contrast and not with the same level of detail, even if there are some pretty areas here and there or some nice statues. Of the 5 main areas, 3 are straightforward dungeons and 2 main areas are deserts, which gets a bit repetitive due to how much time you burn into them. The thick filters that pop sometimes also don't help either. Combat cutscenes are good, violent and impactful, where we see Eve absolutely trouncing the monsters that gave her grief, or trying to survive violent odds. You see that she's in danger, gets beaten up enough to show vulnerability, but also knows that she can dish as much damage as she can take it. So more or less, kinda like the Tomb Raider reboot, except that in this case the devs aren't creepy sadists. On the other hand, normal cutscenes are downright bland, with people just staring at each other and speaking. To make things worse, you can't pause during said cutscenes and you'll be only allowed to skip them if you went through them once. Why does this keep happening with Sony games? The user interface itself is good, it's unobtrusive, and as I said before, it blends well with the scenario. A nice tidbit is that the game tells you when an interactable object is important by making the interaction dot green instead of just white. On the other hand, there is such a focus on the graphical aspects of the game that pausing it or shifting tabs ends up being slow. Gameplay. Alright, now we are starting to cook. The first thing that everyone expects me to say is that combat is just like Nier Automata, since both games are a third-person action-adventure with some focus on exploration. Except that this is where similarities die. Stellar Blade's combat is actually more akin to Dark Souls. Yes, you heard this right. While this game is chill, a lot of what makes Soulsborne so alluring, such as environment traps, multiple weapons, etc., the main skeleton is there in the shape of slower, methodical combat more focused on one-on-one skirmishes, where you are seriously punished for your mistakes. Taking a cue from Sekiro, there's also a stance bar, and from there their differences begin. For those who don't know, a stance bar is a combat mechanic where your character and the enemy have stance bars that get depleted the more hits they take. If the enemy bar is depleted, they fall stunned and is open to receive a special attack, while if Eve's bar is depleted, she receives more damage. In Stella's Blade's case, Eve's stance bar is her shield, while the enemy stance bar has dots showing how many times their stance needs to be damaged before they fall, which may only happen through parries or specific upgrades to special attacks. Yes, as on par with the course, you have the option of blocking and dodging, and if you do either at the right moment, not only you have the chance of a counterattack and damage the enemy's stance in the parrying through a block, but you also charge specific bars for special attacks, the beta and burst gauges specifically. Some attacks can't be blocked and must be dodged in a specific way. Yellow is the normal dodge, blue is a phase dodge that leads to a counter, and purple is a kick that exposes enemy weaknesses. These attacks and more can be upgraded through a specific skill tree accessed at any of the numerous checkpoints that Dark Souls fans will recognize as the bonfires. There are two kinds of checkpoints. The smaller ones with just a place to rest, songs to hear, a small vending machine, a computer to buy skills, and the main ones which add a crafting table to build upgrades and suits, and a quick travel spot. While Eve only has her swords as the main weapon with its combos of light and heavy attacks, she can use her drone as a gun, upgrading it with specific pieces to use different types of ammo. She can also use different types of grenades and high-end items and upgrade specific equipment to attach to her spines. On another subversion of the soul genre, not only she has the refillable Estus flasks, but also carry a limited quantity of different healing items. After going through this game, I have to say first and foremost that for a company that only made cell phone games so far, making a Dark Souls-esque game of this size is a superb jump, especially when you consider how very few hiccups it has compared to other studios that try such a transition from systems and styles. As for the hiccups, there are some odd design choices like having the special attack trigger being the parry button, or fall damage from something like 10 feet while your protagonist is a super soldier. Another weird quirk is that not being able to grab loot by default, having to press a button to do it. Thankfully, it can be switched to auto loot, which raises the question of why it shouldn't be the default. One thing that I particularly dislike is how this game deals with treasure chests, specifically the passwords one. Some chests will have a minigame for you to use before they open up, no problem, but others have a password. Did you find a treasure chest but not the password? It won't let you input anything, and it won't be marked on the map. Found the password? It will just give a vague hint where the chest is, and when you find it, you still have to input said password. Why not just use a passkey instead? The game is arguably short, 5 main areas, 3 of those being rather straightforward dungeons, so most of the time is burned through side quests in the open world zones. Luckily, every time you finish a side quest, you receive the option to immediately teleport to the quest giver, saving an absurd amount of time. There are also the standard fare of collectibles, chests and more. I like the can collectibles because the game allows itself to be somewhat silly with the fanfare of you getting a new can. There is also a fishing minigame, but sadly you are only given the fishing rod in the last area of the game, forcing you to backtrack a lot in order to catch that rare fish. Updates added extra side contests, such as minigames based on Goddess of Victory Nikki, hunting pictures, and finding extra collectibles to get the Nier Automata clothes. Exploration is always on foot, with Eve sprinting faster if her normal sprint isn't interrupted. There are also platforming sections and underwater exploration, though thankfully not really much of an underwater combat. Your drone has a rechargeable ping that can pinpoint enemies, collectibles and interactable objects, and for your sake you will be using that quite often. I'd say that for a mix of a spectacle fighter and a Dark Souls combat with the stun system from Sekiro, Stellar Blade is quite good and tries its own brand. Its combat promotes methodic approach with highly aggressive windows while adding the flash combos into a mix in a way very few games were capable of doing. You can only cancel the start of the attacks, so you have to dish as much punishment as you can without going button mashing, and several of your attacks interrupt your foe. So you check how your enemy attack, charge your cautious defending, then you go all out between its attacks, unlike the Soulsborne series where you only allowed some very few hits. Special attacks are purposefully situational. You have one for the direct attack, another to break shields. They are as flashy as they are functional. One thing that I found particularly weird is that you have aerial combos but no launchers. Speaking of, the devs placed the always beloved option of trying out new moves and practicing them before your purchase. Anytime you wanna check how strong your combos are, just go to the skill shop and hit it away. Another interesting tidbit is that you are allowed to stealth kill your enemies from above and behind. And there's a lot of leeway for such. As long as the enemy doesn't see you, you can be running, juggling or anything, just get back there and one hit kill them. Sadly, while the mix was done well, it wasn't without its bumps. Specifically, the combat and movement system have a vicious problem. They prioritize the animation over their input. For example, whenever you need to do a sharp turn during a sprint or a quick jump, you will have a bigger delay making the curve. During fast sprints, you start acting like a car, doing slow turns, and for the love of Iwata, if you are going to try to imitate Sekiro's style of fast-paced combat, put the goddamn counter trigger on the player's input, not the animation. As in, if you press the defense button, it will take a moment before the defense parry is properly raised, with Eve raising her sword. And this happens to dodge as well. Say dodge is short with a tiny invulnerability window far too small for when the enemy is starting doing area attacks. Again, this won't be a headache at the start. Most of the combat is slow enough that the player can adapt to the parry windows and the broad exploration isn't hampered by the clunky movement. Until you get to the platforming and start dying because Eve missed a rope that was literally next to her, dying to a laser that was just a bit off her model, didn't grab a ledge that was just there, or struggle to climb some stairs, or even sit on the chair in a camp. It can be downright grating sometimes. To make things worse, the last bosses highlight all the problems with the combat mechanics. Their attacks get faster and hit harder, or the parry windows get wonkier, to a point I was told to literally go hyper suicidally aggressive with the last boss, and it worked. Meaning, using the tools that the game gave me didn't work. Dodges weren't fast or good enough, being defensive was suicidal, the boss was too fast to allow proper healing or use the grenades I was given. I had to basically exploit the system, and this isn't a good sign. Again, this is not a game breaker, but it is something that more experienced developers would have ironed out. Other than that, the user interface is good and easy to use aside from being somewhat slow. There are some nifty qualities of light choice as well, such as the adjustable commands, like the directions can be edited to bring up the map or the inventory, keeping a log of everything you've collected so far, but alas, no multiple saves. There is also a boss rush mode and a new game plus added, so you may try in other endings. So by the end, I do think that this game offers a good mix between Sekiro, Dark Souls and Nier Automata, but there are some bumps in the middle of the road that could have been easily fixed. Writing. Stellar Blade follows the treaded ground of several other games of its genre. We have the start, where Eve drops down into Earth with her squad to get rid of the monster infestation that drove her kind to space, pretty much like Nier Automata. Her mission is to find and kill the Elder Natiba, who supposedly controls all the others. Killing this monster would lead to a complete victory. But as soon as she reaches the ground, most of her squad is killed, pretty much like Nier Automata. Okay, remember when I said that Kim Hyun-tae proudly wears his inspirations on his sleeves? Yeah, the base of this game is crystal clear, being Nier Automata, in style, beats and construction. It would be definitely be called a ripoff if he wasn't so blatant about how much he loved Yoko Taro's work. Now, the big question that everybody asks me as soon as I talk about how I played Stellar Blade: is the writing as good as Nier Automata? No. Hell no. And the second question that I get, well, okay, not much of a question, but as soon as I say that Stellar Blade's writing isn't as deep and good as Nier Automata, people say a variant of, I knew that it was just a shallow, stupid copy, which isn't true either. You see, the thing about Stellar Blade's writing is that it's simple and straightforward. Simple isn't necessarily bad. Just because the writing isn't as good and deep as its predecessor doesn't make it bad. And my biggest problem writing this review is that everything that I found interesting and good is locked behind the spoiler territory. So bear with me. Alright, let's try it out. The differences start on how this game develops. Eve is the sole survivor of her squad, completely cut off from the colony that sent her and only survives due to the intervention of Adam, a scavenger. Yeah, I know, Adam and Eve, post-apocalyptic scenario, I'm getting there. She survives due to the intervention of Adam, who brings her to the secret city of Xion, where survivors of the wars with the Natiba gather under the guidance of Orcal, an aged sage who is practically fused to the city's informational centers. Orcal needs 4 power cells to properly activate all the resources from Xion to find the Elder Natiba and wake up thousands of sleeping colonists. And he needs the core of 4 bosses, Elder Natibas, to make a key to the nest where Eve may fight the Elder Natiba. Yes, this is a kind of the RPG plot where you have to find 4 crystals and so on. From there, Eve starts to explore Xion and meeting its inhabitants, who are mostly dicks who treat her harshly until she starts doing favors for them. Again, standard fare. The inhabitants have their quirks, and whenever Eve explores a new area to find a boss to kill, their quests get a bit annoying back and forth. Yeah, characterization isn't this game's strongest point either. I understand that Eve is meant to be like a newborn, literally made for war and discovering a whole complex world below, but she barely talks about anything that could flesh her out. The biggest traits that could be considered shreds of a personality would be that she doesn't like swimming, and I actually liked that. She's quick to forgive and eager to help and curious about ancient technologies, but she barely talks about anything outside her mission and the usual cookie-cutter good protagonist. Adam is also blasé. He talks in the same tone, offers some sarcastic comments here and there, but not much. The third member of her squad, Lily, like Lilith, surprise. Anyway, Lily is the usual peppy gearhead who helps Eve with her upgrades, and sometimes gets at odds with Adam for some comedic banter. On the other hand, they aren't unlikable, grating, or annoying. They are neutral. I would have certainly loved if Eve came to her own conclusions about the world, especially since the data logs were written by her, and she does show more traits in there. Another problem with the plot is the demand for an emotional investment that just isn't there. The game doesn't take time for us to get attached to Eve's colony. We never see how it is, nor we talk with her boss until the literal ending. The directing of the scenes between Eve and her mentor Tachi are well done enough that you feel a strong connection between these characters, but Tachi dies in the first 5 minutes of the game. And it's not like there wasn't an opportunity to develop these characters out, it just wasn't done. We see the 3 talking about some tidbits of the past, but not much about their personal flaws or expectations between the basic banter. The scenario isn't overly fleshed either. It's solid, it's stable, again, straightforward and simple. But it's too focused on the main agents of the scenario to make it properly brief. We see scavengers that try to kill agents like Eve, but they aren't developed. We see that there may be other factions, but again, nothing much. There are some nifty details about the background, such as the clothes explaining that one of their developers was a pervert, but that bumps into another big vicious problem. There are way too many logs to find and the game relies way too much on them. And the vast majority of these logs are absolutely filler of people lamenting how they died or complaining about obvious details in the scenario. I actually missed an important fact of the plot because I couldn't bother to read every single tidbit that I was collecting. These logs could have been used to flesh out the scenario a bit more, but alas. On the good, non-spoiler side, I'd say that there's a good melancholic tone about everything around the game. No matter where she goes, Eve stumbles about scattered remains of people just trying to live their lives as best as they can. And there is an interesting theme about memories. Most people just want their memories to live on, or the memories of their beloved ones to be sent back to Mother Sphere, with the symbolism between memories and souls and Mother Sphere and the Catholic Church a bit obvious. In the end, I don't think that this story was bad, it's simple and straightforward. Its biggest sin is that it just wasn't big or profound enough as the scenario it took inspiration from. Stellar Blade uses most of this story and characterization to build a post-apocalyptic world, but sadly it just limits itself to that, to build this world, whereas Nier Automata develops the post-apocalyptic scenario to talk about the human condition, hopes, dreams, the struggle against an unfair world, fate and more, but there may be some nice hidden tidbits here and there. Soundtrack. I've played the game with Korean voice acting and I have to say that it's good. Nothing superb, more due to the lack of material that demanded emotional highs and lows, just good. The music itself surprised me because even there it kept using Automata as its base. Automata likes to use calmer but sadder music for exploration and Stellar Blade also does the same. It works well because it eases the sense of repetition and going through a whole thread of nothing but sand. But they are limited to just one style. Some songs have a more heroic approach, others have taken inspiration from bossa nova, and as a Brazilian that's absolutely a win in my book. Combat music varies in quality, some will be really good, others will be more dated with K-pop. Some will be blatantly inspired by Dark Souls, and others inspired by Nier Automata as well. Due to the lack of a general theme or a specific style, this may end up grinding some gears, but I actually enjoy them. Nothing that I save on my playlists, perhaps some with the exception of one or two tracks, but I overall enjoy them. Final thoughts. In the end, yeah, neither side of this debate wins. This game isn't as awful or as sexual as people decry it to be, and while it's good, the combat has some nasty spots that flare up at the end of the game, but mostly stemming from the sudden jump from a company that did cell phone games to a friggin' soul-inspired action game. Just for being able to pull this off and this well, I'd say that the company deserves a lot of praise, even more when I was told that they share profits of selling this title with their employees. It does have a lot of pros and some of the best ties between design and story I've ever seen in quite a while, but it does have several bumps as well, with a plain story that demands an emotional attachment that just isn't there and it didn't invest a lot into. If you are into eye candy or just want to play a game where a badass fighter kills monsters, this is a game for you. But if you are seeking something deeper, back to Automata. Spoilers. Alright, before I begin, I must say that due to Stellar Blade's drawing so much from Nier Automata, you will be spoiled on one of the major plot twists if you play the other. And between playing Nier Automata and Stellar Blade, I will absolutely tell you that play Automata first, unless you're depressed or down. If such, please for the love of God do not touch Nier Automata. I love that game, but it's depressive as even with an optimistic ending. So if you haven't played Automata yet, stop everything and go do it. Still with me? Alright, let's do this. What I really enjoyed about Stellar Blade was that it takes a superbly good approach to its own storytelling. It hides everything in plain sight, and I mean everything. Every single plot twist from big to small, it's hidden in plain sight, just waiting for the player to pay attention to the details. I absolutely love hiding in plain sight because it takes an extra hard effort to pull it off, but the rewards to the viewer are doubled. A keen player will have their suspicions validated without spoiling much of the game, while a clueless player will be surprised and feel a sense of cohesion within the story. Everything was there from the beginning. It was just that the players either didn't or did catch on. Because turns out that while Eve has in mind to save humanity from the Natiba and talks about saving the humans of Xion, not only mankind has been extinct all along, they went extinct because of Mother Sphere, who created the new species of humans to replace the old one, her androids, which includes Eve. Now, part of the plot will be absurdly obvious to the main player. I mean, Eve, Adam and Lily? Really? Androids, Mother Sphere, meaning an egg. But then you start noticing the details. For example, everyone is so casual with cybernetic parts because it's a post-apocalyptic world. Therefore, the majority of the players will think that Eve and the people of Xion are simply cyborgs. At first, I felt weirded out by the pale complexion of some of the characters. They resemble freaky dolls, and then it dawned on me that they are dolls. The game is telling you from the get-go that the hairdresser's arms don't feel like stretched synthetic skin because he lives in our whole world and was forced to convert his arms into cyber implants. The game is telling you that he is like that because he is an older model. I won't comment on the relationship between Eve and Taki, but I do praise the directing. Even if both barely interacted, Taki's second death at the hands of Eve was so well done, it actually managed to be touching. I knew Adam would be the elder Natiba because duh. But then I paid attention to his character model. He's the only completely human character that came from Xion. Everyone else has either a bizarre complexion or just some tidbits and metal sticking out. The only ridiculously human characters are the agents of Mother Sphere, who are, as far as I know, all female. Another interesting tidbit is that one can interpret that the statue motif of Mother Sphere's machines can be seen all over the place in the statues lying around, same as the enemies through the whole map. A significant but easy to miss detail is that the majority of the enemies in the maps change, except two, the robots. At first I just chalked it up to the same company using the same assets, but then it dawned on me that the robots are there because they were the past agents of Mother Sphere who tried to exterminate mankind. Now, sadly, the game tries to make you choose between sides, and neither of them are particularly interesting. On one hand you have Mother Sphere, the AI that wiped mankind, erasing the past and playing in 1984 like a recipe book. And on the other hand you have a race of monsters that keeps slaughtering everyone around their way to show no sign of ever evolving back to its roots. It gets especially murky since the game never explains how much Adam controls the Natibas and what was his whole deal with his right hand who goes crazy and slaughters half of Xion. He doesn't particularly condemn her nor explain why they fell out. So I just ended up joining Adam because not only Mother Sphere was the planar villain, the whole game pushes you to join with the whole symbolism of Adam and Eve and so on. The game also doesn't explain what happens to Eve after her fusion with Adam. And again, before moving on, I just have to say that this level of hiding in plain sight is staggering. It's basically a work that started from the ground up on the design and by design alone. If King Hyun-tae joined forces with Yoko Taro, adding this level of design with the depth of Taro's stories, it would be probably the most bombastic game of the century. Alright, now another warning. From here onwards, this will be pure speculation on my part. I don't know much about South Korea. I watched their movies and one or two series, and I watched some of the most bombastic news and one or two documentaries. I may be completely wrong on this subject, and if I am, please do leave a comment or two. That out of the way, I think that there is a lot about Stellar Blade that meets the eye, but the devs chose the subtle route. In this game, Mother Sphere was created by Raphael Marx, Adam, to help mankind, but ended up betraying him, trying to exterminate mankind and then replacing mankind with her own brand of humans. After that, the game makes it crystally painfully clear that Mother Sphere controls the androids through religious indoctrination, And then there's the whole idea of their souls being in their memory cards. Seeing this made me think, could be this some sort of commentary on Korea's situation? A country with a sharp divide between classes and a serious problem of megacorps, basically trying to brainwash the population through sometimes literal religious indoctrination. Modern sphere was created by humans such as corporations. Yet it uses humankind's weak spots to solidify its rule and went completely ballistic when it was close to losing. It could have just programmed its own robots like that. Why give its children, the new mankind, its android sentience? And there is the whole idea of mankind having to lose itself to become monsters in order to purge the religious artificial being that is already callous toward its creations. Remembers a lot about the inherited destructive system. But again, sadly I am not qualified to give certainties, only to speculate about food for thought. With that out of the way, thank you all very much for listening to me and see you next time.